Absolutely. Firefighters are one of the ones at greatest risk, and during the times we've had fires down in the San Diego area, San Bernardino area, we've had a number of firefighters come ill. As a group, my experience is firefighters tend to be much more sensitive to this issue because they know they're at a greater risk. One, because of, they've got big radiant heat loads out there, okay? They're wearing special protective equipment that also put a much bigger burden on them, okay, from a work standpoint. They're doing heavy work, okay? So absolutely, those things all should be taken into consideration. And firefighters do the work-rest regimen part of that, right? Taking breaks and drinking water. But still, under these extreme conditions, firefighters they recognize those symptoms, and hopefully they're getting out and telling a supervisor. Yeah, no, I mean, if that's part of that job, it's required as part of that job, then you, as an employer, those are your employees, you have to come up with ways of dealing with that. No different than a firefighter, no different than what they do in the military to deal with heat and wearing the protective clothing and equipment that they have to be dealing with. You have to come up with procedures to try to minimize the potential for heat illness. Because what you're saying is you're contracting with them out there, okay, and that's a requirement by the general contractor, right? And so you're having to deal with that as an employer. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, here again, when there are times, for instance, with any sort of contractual situation where you have, for instance, a general contractor, they may choose to go beyond Cal OSHA's requirements, okay? And they may choose to say, we believe this is best practice in industry, and if you're going to work for us, okay, you are going to follow these rules. You're going to come onto our site, you'll follow these rules, whether it's respiratory protection or fire protective clothing or whatever the personal protective equipment is, okay? That's their decision. They're making that contractual with the sub who's going to work for them and do the work. So you have to work that out with them. The question over here, for if everybody didn't hear it, is that this idea of that was another rumor on the street, like the hose rumor I talked about earlier and filling the water containers. There was a rumor on the street that you had to have chairs out there. Everybody had to have a chair, right? That's not true. The idea is that when someone's taking a shade break, okay, the idea is that you don't want to plop them down on a hot surface, right? So there needs to be some sort of insulation, and that was the point I was trying to make earlier when I talked about natural shade versus, say, artificial shade, that sometimes with artificial shade, you may have warm ground under the artificial shade. So if someone came in feeling that they were, having some symptoms of heat illness, and then they're on the warm ground, you could potentially be making things worse, right? So what we're suggesting is that, yeah, there needs to be some sort of insulation barrier between that warm ground and the person that's going to be taking that rest break there. So it's not specific. It doesn't say buckets, chairs, So just, yeah, anything that provides some insulation from that warm ground. Okay? And like I said earlier also, that natural shade, typically the ground's cool inside of, say, an orchard. Okay? And so you saw the picture of the man sitting on the ground. That's perfectly acceptable because we're suggesting in that picture that the ground's not warm. Okay? The heat illness prevention procedures has to be the way that, I don't know if you saw that, I'm not going to bring it back up. It said it has to be nearby or available. So in other words, what they're saying, they want to see that during the inspection, whereas the IIPP, who's been inspected in here before by enforcement, right? They usually give you a sheet of requested documents, right? And usually the IIPP is one of those requested documents. The heat illness prevention procedures may be checked on there, but typically they're going to say, I want to see that during the inspection. That's what they're saying here, okay? Cal OSHA cannot do an inspection unless there's somebody there that represents management or is a supervisor, right, that represents management. They cannot start their inspection with an employee, right? They have to hold what's called an opening conference, And the person that they hold the opening conference with, it says in their policies, has to be somebody that represents management, okay? Because they're going to talk to that person about the employer's rights and responsibilities, okay, and employees' rights and responsibilities during that opening conference, okay? Right? And if you're concerned about that, I'll show you right now where enforcement's policies and procedures are that are available to you, and it tells the enforcement person how they're supposed to do their inspection, okay?